Darling, tables like this are for pedigree, not for projects. The words slithered from Victoria Davenport's lips, a venomous whisper wrapped in silk. They were just loud enough to cut through the elegant hum of the Boston Athenaeum, just sharp enough to make the string quartet falter for a half beat, loud enough for the uniformed staff, polishing already gleaming silver, to freeze, their white-gloved hands hovering in mid-air. Before we witness the fallout from that single devastating sentence, I have to ask, where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city, your state, your country in the comments below. Let us know where this story is reaching. And if you believe that dignity is non-negotiable and that justice should be for everyone, not just the entitled, then do me a favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to this channel. Your engagement helps us bring stories like this out of the shadows and into the light. We are so glad you're here. Now back to the woman in the crosshairs. Her name was Serafina Cruz, and she did not flinch. She sat, a pillar of stillness, exactly where the event organizers had placed her. The seat of honor at table 1, directly beneath the grand, cascading crystal chandelier that had illuminated Boston's elite for over a century. The dress she wore was the color of a midnight sky, a deep sapphire satin that seemed to drink the light of the room and reflect it back as a quiet, powerful glow. The fabric pooled around her, its liquid shimmer catching incandescent highlights with every subtle shift of her body. A matching belt, severe and architectural, cinched her waist, a stark line against the soft, flowing drape of the gown. Her hair, the color of black onyx, was parted with surgical precision down the middle and gathered into a low, intricate knot at the nape of her neck. It was a style that spoke of discipline and control. A single, heavy gold chain rested against her collarbone, a stark and simple statement. She was not moving, save for her eyes. Her eyes, dark and intelligent, moved with a slow, deliberate grace, scanning the heiress across the table. It was not a look of anger, but of assessment, as if she were a grandmaster at chess, watching her opponent make a foolish, predictable move. She was filing away every micro-expression, every syllable, for a reckoning that was yet to come. A young server, no older than 20, froze beside their table, a bottle of champagne sweating in his hand, his eyes wide as they darted between the two women. The ambient tension in the grand library was no longer just a backdrop. It was the main symphony now, and it was reaching a fever pitch. Victoria Davenport, 31, a woman constructed of heirloom diamonds and a confidence she had inherited rather than earned, leaned back in her gilded chair. She studied Serafina, not as a person, but as a clerical error, an unsightly blemish on an otherwise perfect seating chart. Her long, manicured fingers, each nail a perfect almond of pale pink, tapped a restless rhythm against the delicate stem of her champagne flute. "Could you please guide her to the general admission section?" she said to a passing floor manager, a man named Mr. Davies, whose face was already a mask of professional anxiety. She didn't bother to look away from Serafina as she spoke, her tone dripping with a saccharine sweetness that failed to mask its surgical cruelty. "She's clearly not with our party." Mr. Davies hesitated, his gaze flicking to the elegant, hand-scripted place card in front of Serafina. "She's not one of us," Victoria added, her smile now a brittle, sugar-spun thing. Serafina's hand, adorned with a simple gold band, moved, not toward her wine glass, not to the napkin in her lap, but to the small black obsidian clutch at her side. She didn't open it. She didn't speak. Her stillness, her absolute refusal to be rattled, was a roar in the deafening silence that had fallen over the table. Across from them, an older politician, Senator Alistair Finch, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the starched collar of his tuxedo suddenly feeling like a noose. A young photojournalist named Marco, hired to capture the evening's manufactured elegance, instinctively adjusted the lens of his camera. He wasn't aiming for the staged smiles at the podium anymore. He had found the real story. He captured the frozen tableau in a series of crisp, silent frames. The heiress's sneer, the senator's discomfort, and Serafina's unnerving calm. Victoria's voice came again, this time a pitch higher, designed to carry. It's always so terribly awkward when uninvited guests manage to slip into VIP areas. She glanced at her friend beside her, a vapid-looking woman in pale yellow, and they shared a soft titter of laughter. It was a sound like fine crystal cracking under pressure. Serafina finally moved. She placed her clutch back on the table, folded her hands over the pristine linen, and looked at Victoria Davenport as if they were the only two souls in the sprawling, book-lined ballroom. Her gaze was level, patient, and sharpened to a point that made Victoria's laughter catch and die in her throat. Somewhere at the far end of the hall, the master of ceremonies' voice boomed faintly through the sound system, announcing a keynote speaker. But here, at table 1, under the weight of a century of gilded history, the real show had just begun. Because Serafina Cruz was not an uninvited guest. She was not a seating mistake. She was the architect. She was the largest single benefactor in the Davenport Legacy Foundation's entire history. A $5 billion endowment, managed by her firm, Apex Global Ventures, was the silent, invisible engine that had kept this very gala afloat, had funded the careers of everyone on that stage, and had propped up the Davenport family's fading legacy for the better part of a decade. And if Victoria Davenport thought she could humiliate Serafina into leaving, she was about to receive a brutal, life-altering education on the difference between old money and true power. Tonight, Serafina would not write the story. She would simply let them write their own ending. And then, she would decide when to slam the book shut. The next course was served. Silver domes were lifted with synchronized theatrical grace, revealing an artfully arranged portion of seared scallops. But at table 1, the food went untouched, growing cold on the fine china. The tension was a feast in itself. Victoria's gaze kept flicking back to Serafina's obsidian clutch, as if the small, unassuming black box held the answer to this woman's audacious presence. She leaned conspiratorially toward her friend, her voice a stage whisper designed for maximum effect. It's always such a scene when security has to escort someone out mid-event, so disruptive to the auction. Her friend's eyes, wide and nervous, darted between Serafina and Victoria, then to Mr. Davies, the floor manager, who still hovered nearby like a ghost waiting for instructions. The photographer, Marco, repositioned himself, pretending to be interested in a floral arrangement. His camera strap brushed against the sapphire satin of Serafina's gown as he passed behind her, close enough to catch the faint, intoxicating scent of her perfume. It was something warm and complex, like sandalwood and night-blooming jasmine, a scent that was impossible to place, and even harder to forget. Serafina didn't turn. Across the table, Senator Finch cleared his throat, a loud, gravelly sound. Perhaps, Victoria, this is neither the time nor the place. Victoria cut him off with a flick of her wrist. On the contrary, Alistair, it's precisely the time and place. Donor seating is reserved for confirmed patrons. Her manicured hand, a predator's claw, reached forward. Without a hint of courtesy, she snatched up the small ivory place card. Serafina Cruz was printed on it, in shimmering gold script. She held it between her thumb and forefinger, dangling it for a moment as if it were a dead insect, before letting it drop onto the white linen. It landed with a soft, final thud. "She's not even on the official list," Victoria announced, her voice ringing with triumph as she directed her words at the beleaguered floor manager. The man, Mr. Davies, looked profoundly uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I would need to confirm that with the board director." "Confirm what?" Victoria's tone sharpened, losing its sugary coating and revealing the steel beneath. "That she is sitting in a seat she did not pay for? That she does not belong here?" A soft murmur began to ripple out from the surrounding tables. Guests were starting to notice the drama unfolding at the center of the room. A woman in a navy sequin gown leaned toward her date, her hand shielding her mouth. "Who on earth is she talking about?" she whispered. Marco lifted his camera again. The lens found Serafina's face. It remained a study in composure, a masterclass in patience under fire. He zoomed in, capturing the subtle, almost imperceptible tightening of her jaw. Finally, Mr. Davies, propelled by Victoria's relentless pressure, stepped forward. "Miss," he began, his voice low and apologetic, "could I possibly ask you to join me by the side entrance? We can get this all sorted out quietly." Every eye at table 1 swiveled to Serafina. The entire room seemed to be holding its breath. She smoothed the sapphire fabric at her waist with one hand, the movement slow and deliberate, catching another brilliant arc of chandelier light. Slowly, she reached for her clutch. She opened it just enough to slide her sleek black phone into her palm, shielding the screen from view. 2 words left her lips, spoken so quietly that only Mr. Davies and Marco, who was now standing perilously close, could hear them. "Initiate protocol." She set the clutch back down, closed it with a soft click, and lifted her gaze to Victoria. "You seem quite certain about a great many things this evening." Victoria tilted her head, the smug, serpentine smile returning. "I am certain about what belongs in this room." "Ah," Serafina's eyes held hers, a silent, powerful gravity pulling all the air from between them. "And I am certain about what sustains it." The words were quiet, but they carried an immense, unspoken weight. Something in the way she said them made Victoria blink, a flicker of doubt, a shadow passing across the bright, hard surface of her certainty. At the far end of the ballroom, the MC's voice returned, cajoling the guests to prepare for the live auction. But at this table, the bids had already been placed, not in dollars, but in dominance, and Serafina was holding the winning hand. The auctioneer's practiced, rolling voice washed over the grand library, a warm tide of manufactured excitement. "And now, for our first item of the evening, a week-long stay in a private Tuscan villa." But at table 1, the air remained razor-thin, charged with an Arctic cold. Victoria reached for her champagne, took a long, slow sip, her eyes never leaving Serafina's face. She set the flute down with an audible, deliberate click against the china. "You know," she said, her voice laced with feigned sympathy, "we've had incidents before. People trying to slip in with forged invitations, hoping to rub shoulders with their betters. It's a sad sort of desperation, really." The words were pure bait, designed to provoke a reaction, to force Serafina to defend herself, and, in doing so, reveal her weakness. Serafina did not take it. Instead, she adjusted her seating, a minuscule movement that sent a ripple through the sapphire satin of her gown, a wave of deep, cosmic blue against the stark white linen. Her posture remained impeccable, her gaze unwavering. She was a mountain, and Victoria's taunts were mere gusts of wind. From the far side, Victoria's friend in the pale yellow dress leaned in. "Should we just call security directly?" she whispered, though it was loud enough for the entire table to hear. "Already in motion," Victoria replied breezily, lifting her own phone. She tapped the screen a few times with a flourish, then gave a pointed nod toward Mr. Davies. He hesitated again, his eyes pleading with Senator Finch, who now looked as though he would rather be anywhere else on Earth. "Ma'am, I truly believe we should handle this discreetly," Mr. Davies began. Victoria's voice sliced through his attempt at de-escalation. "Discretion is for mistakes. This is a matter of security." Marco, the photographer, adjusted his camera again, angling it past the towering centerpiece of white orchids to perfectly frame the escalating exchange. A low hum of intense curiosity had now spread to the nearest 3 tables. People weren't even pretending to eat anymore. Suddenly, Victoria reached forward, her fingers brushing against the obsidian clutch beside Serafina's plate. "What's in here, I wonder?" she asked, her tone attempting a playful curiosity that was undermined by the predatory glint in her eyes. "A forged ticket, perhaps?" Serafina placed her hand firmly over the clutch, her touch a clear and final warning. "Not yours." Victoria's smile thinned into a hard, unpleasant line. "Everything at this table is here because of the Foundation's generosity." "No," Serafina said, her voice even and dangerously calm. "Everything at this table exists because of respect, and I see none of that in your hands." The smile shattered. For the first time that evening, a crack appeared in Victoria Davenport's flawless porcelain facade. In a flash of theatrical indignation, she reached down, plucked Serafina's ivory place card from the linen, and tossed it dismissively toward a passing server. "She's not even on the guest list," she declared, her voice rising, projecting toward the auctioneer's podium, ensuring the entire room was now a witness to her power play. The server froze mid-step, the card landing awkwardly on his silver tray. A man at the adjacent table, a well-known tech CEO, frowned. "Is all this really necessary?" he asked, his voice laced with disapproval. Victoria turned her attention on him, her eyes flashing. "Yes, it's disruptive and disrespectful to have people here who simply do not belong." Marco's camera shutter snapped 3 times in quick succession. The sound was unnaturally loud in the tense silence that followed. Serafina rested her hands lightly in her lap. The gold chain at her neck caught a single, sharp pinpoint of chandelier light. She inhaled slowly, a breath of pure control, then looked directly at the floor manager. "If you are going to ask me to move," she said, her voice clear and steady, "I suggest you confirm that decision with your board chairman first." Victoria let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound utterly devoid of humor. "The board? Darling, they will thank me for this." Unseen by anyone at the table, Serafina's thumb pressed a single command on the phone hidden in her lap. The screen lit up for a brief, intense moment, then went dark. It was the smallest, most insignificant movement in the entire opulent room. And it was the one that was about to flip this entire world upside down. "Okay, we have to pause here for a second. The battle lines have been drawn. The command has been sent. What would you do in this situation? Would you walk away with your head held high, or would you stand your ground and fight? Let us know your strategy in the comments below. And if you're on the edge of your seat waiting to see how this takedown concludes, make sure you've hit that subscribe button. The finale is coming. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. The server still stood paralyzed, Serafina's discarded place card sitting accusingly on his silver tray. He was a statue of uncertainty, caught between a direct order from a powerful heiress and the unnerving calm of her target. At the edge of the table, Mr. Davies shifted his weight, his eyes darting from Victoria's furious face to Serafina's placid one and back again, a frantic game of emotional tennis. Serafina's phone was now safely back in her clutch, the flap closed with slow, deliberate precision. A command had been sent. Miles away, in a sleek, glass-walled office overlooking the Charles River, her executive assistant's monitor lit up with a single, stark message: Protocol Omega. Active. The assistant, a woman named Anya who operated with the efficiency of a military strategist, didn't hesitate. She opened a secure channel and began a pre-planned sequence of events that would unravel the Davenport legacy thread by thread. Back in the Athenaeum, Serafina raised her eyes to Victoria. "You seem remarkably committed to having me removed," she said, her voice as level as a frozen lake. "But not nearly as committed to understanding why I am here in the first place." Victoria tilted her chin, a gesture of pure aristocratic disdain. "Oh, I know exactly why you're here. To be seen, to get close to power. It's the oldest story in the book." Serafina's lips curved, not into a smile, but into something far sharper, more dangerous. "Close to power?" She let the question hang in the air, a drop of acid sizzling on the linen tablecloth. "You're looking at the engine, Victoria, and you're mistaking it for a passenger." The table fell into a profound silence. Even the distant drone of the auctioneer seemed to fade away, as if it belonged to another universe entirely. Across the table, Senator Finch's fork, laden with untouched scallops, rested mid-air. Marco's camera lens was a fixed, unblinking eye, documenting the precise moment the power dynamic shifted. Victoria, sensing her control slipping, waved a dismissive hand towards the floor manager. "Please, just escort her out. Now." But Mr. Davies didn't move. His phone had just buzzed in his pocket, a silent, urgent vibration. He glanced at the screen, his brow furrowing as he read a message he couldn't possibly comprehend. A priority alert from the board chairman's office. "Board alert. All actions pending. Await immediate review." Serafina leaned back slightly in her chair, the sapphire satin of her dress catching a streak of gold from the chandelier above. "You should check your messages," she told him, her tone as calm and pleasant as if she were suggesting he try the wine. He hesitated for a second, then took a half step away from the table, his own phone now in his hand. "What is this nonsense?" Victoria demanded, her voice sharp with confusion and growing panic. "Consequence," Serafina said. The single word landed with more weight, more finality, than any insult or threat had all night. At the far end of the grand ballroom, a woman in a severe black pantsuit slipped in through a side door. She was one of Serafina's top attorneys. She didn't approach the table, not yet. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was a statement. Marco's lens caught it all. The attorney's quiet entrance, the deepening frown on Mr. Davies's face as he read his phone, Victoria's confused, panicked glance over her shoulder. "Miss Davenport," Serafina said softly, her voice drawing Victoria's frantic attention back to her. "You've spent this entire evening measuring my worth by all the wrong metrics. My dress, my seat, my name on a guest list. You've been tallying up the superficials." "And what, pray tell, matters most?" Victoria asked, a desperate attempt at her earlier bravado that missed the mark entirely. "Control," Serafina answered, her voice dropping to an intimate, devastating whisper. "Control of the resources upon which you and this entire foundation depend." It wasn't a shout, but it was a thunderclap, a ripple of understanding, of dawning horror, moved through the table. It was the undeniable sense that something had irrevocably shifted, that Victoria Davenport had not just picked a fight with the wrong woman, but had declared war on the very source of her own power. Serafina reached for her water glass, her movements unhurried, graceful, as though she had all the time in the world. In truth, she didn't need more than a few minutes, because by the time the auctioneer's hammer fell on the next overpriced lot, the real bidding war, the one for control of this room, this foundation, and this city's social hierarchy, would already be over. And she had already won. The auctioneer's voice rose above the nervous clinking of silverware. "Ladies and gentlemen, prepare yourselves. This next lot is truly the centerpiece of our evening, a testament to the generosity that fills this room." A spotlight swept across the cavernous space, its beam brushing past the frozen drama at table 1. Victoria straightened instinctively, a Pavlovian response, preparing to raise her paddle and display her family's philanthropy. Then Serafina stood. The movement was fluid, unhurried, and utterly commanding. The sapphire satin shifted with her, catching the light in molten midnight waves. In that moment, 100 pairs of eyes, 100 whispered conversations, all fell silent. Every gaze in the room followed her as she stepped away from the table. The low, immaculate knot of her hair, the glint of gold at her neck, the unshakable confidence in her stride as she began to walk, not toward the exit, but toward the stage. "Excuse me, miss," Mr. Davies murmured as she passed, his voice weak and uncertain. But Serafina did not break her pace. The auctioneer glanced up from his notes, his practiced smile faltering with surprise. "Ma'am, the stage is reserved for—" Serafina took the microphone from its stand. She did not snatch it. She took it with the calm authority of someone who knew it belonged to her. "Before you announce the total amount raised tonight," she began, her voice filling the ballroom. It wasn't loud, but it resonated with a clarity and power that seized the attention of every single person in the room. "You should probably subtract $5 billion from it." The murmur was instantaneous, a ripple of confusion that quickly swelled into a wave of shock, spreading to the furthest, darkest corners of the library. "My firm, Apex Global Ventures," she continued, her voice as clear and cold as ice, "is withdrawing our endowment from the Davenport Legacy Foundation, effective immediately." A collective gasp went through the room. At table 1, Victoria's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Her face had gone a ghastly, chalky white. Serafina turned, her dark eyes scanning the audience, making contact with dozens of stunned faces. "For years, my firm has quietly funded this institution. We have been the silent engine underwriting the very galas where some people feel comfortable questioning who belongs at the table." She let the words hang in the air, a damning indictment, before her gaze returned to lock onto Victoria's. "We do not measure a person's worth by their seat assignment or their last name. We measure it by their integrity." The auctioneer shifted awkwardly, looking to the wings for guidance that would not come. The MC took a half-step forward, then froze, realizing he was utterly out of his depth. The attorney in the black pantsuit now moved with purpose, approaching the stage and handing Serafina a thick, leather-bound folder. "This," Serafina said, holding the folder up for all to see, "is the formal notice being delivered to the board. The funds are frozen. The contracts are terminated." The gasps deepened into frantic whispers. Phones lit up across the room, their screens glowing like tiny, panicked spotlights in the dim hall. Victoria, still standing, looked as though she might collapse. You can't just do that," she stammered, the words barely audible. "I can," Serafina said, her tone as final as the closing of a vault door. "And I have." Marco's camera was clicking in a rapid, furious succession, freezing the historic moment in a series of crisp, merciless digital frames. The heiress, caught mid-protest, her face a mask of shattered arrogance, and the CEO, standing tall in sapphire blue under the chandelier's brilliant, unforgiving blaze. "This is not about revenge," Serafina said, her eyes sweeping the room one last time, a queen surveying a conquered kingdom. "It's about respect. And tonight, this room and this foundation failed that most basic and essential measure." She placed the microphone back in its stand with a soft, definitive click. "Enjoy the rest of your evening." No raised voice, no dramatic flourish. just finality. Clean, unshakable, and absolutely irreversible. And then, Serafina Cruz walked off the stage, the soft rustle of her satin gown cutting through the stunned, absolute silence of the room, like the final curtain falling on a tragedy. The microphone still hummed with a faint, electric echo as Serafina stepped off the stage, her sapphire gown gliding over the polished parquet floor. Behind her, the carefully constructed world of the ballroom fractured into chaos. At table 1, Victoria remained standing, one of her manicured hands gripping the back of her chair so tightly her knuckles were white, as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. "Board members," she stammered to no one in particular. "We need to convene. Now." Her friend in yellow touched her arm, whispering frantically, but Victoria shook her off, her eyes wide and unseeing. Across the room, Senator Alistair Finch had his phone out, his thumb scrolling furiously through a flood of emails that had already begun to pour in. "5 billion gone?" he muttered under his breath, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He said it as if speaking the number aloud might somehow make it smaller, more manageable. It didn't. Mr. Davies, the floor manager, stood frozen near the stage steps, holding his clipboard like a useless, flimsy shield. His phone buzzed again. Another board alert. He read the latest update, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed against a dry throat. His career was over. He knew it in that instant. Clusters of elegantly dressed guests had turned in their chairs, some leaning precariously over floral centerpieces, to get a better look at the woman in blue, who was now calmly crossing the room toward the grand exit. The glow from the chandeliers, once warm and inviting, seemed suddenly harsh, clinical, and far too revealing. The MC was speaking urgently into his earpiece, his voice tight with panic. "Do we continue? What do I do?" His eyes flicked from the empty stage to the huddled group of board members gathering in a panicked knot by the back wall. Marco moved like a phantom through it all, his camera a silent, relentless witness. He caught Victoria's pale, stricken face in one frame. He captured a board member, a woman in her 60s, covering her mouth with a horrified hand in the next. Then, his lens found the attorney in the black pantsuit, calmly handing the thick, leather-bound folder to a man in a tuxedo. Philip Davenport, Victoria's father and the foundation's chairman. His expression was the grim mask of a man realizing the bridge he was standing on had just been vaporized. The live auctioneer, bless his heart, tried to salvage the moment, his voice trembling slightly. "Lot number 7. A magnificent diamond necklace." But his voice faltered and died when he saw that not a single paddle was raised. Not a single eye was on him. Near the coat check, 2 prominent donors were speaking in low, urgent tones. "If Apex pulls out, others will follow." "They already are," the other replied, holding up a phone displaying a text message from his wealth manager, withdrawing all support for Davenport Legacy, effective immediately. By the dessert table, the head of catering checked his watch, muttering to a colleague, "If this gala folds tonight, we're not getting paid." Serafina reached the ornate double doors. The sound of the imploding room followed her. A rising, discordant symphony of whispers, hurried footsteps, and the sharp, solitary click of her own heels on the marble. She did not look back. At the far end of the room, Victoria finally moved, shoving past a bewildered Mr. Davies. "Stop her!" she hissed, but the words lacked conviction. Her voice was smaller now, swallowed by the much larger, more terrifying noise of panic and financial ruin. In the grand entryway, the attorney fell into step beside Serafina, murmuring quiet updates. "Emergency board meeting has been called. Media requests are pouring in, all major news outlets." Good, Serafina replied, her voice calm. She adjusted the strap of her obsidian clutch, the gold chain at her neck catching one last defiant glint from the chandelier before the heavy doors closed behind her. Inside, the shattering continued. Out here, there was only the quiet click of her heels on the cool stone and the certain knowledge that the real dismantling had only just begun. The hotel's marble lobby was an oasis of calm compared to the chaos she'd left upstairs, but it wouldn't be for long. A semicircle of reporters was already forming near the revolving doors, their phones lighting up with alerts from sources inside the gala. They had been drawn by the scent of blood in the water. Camera lights flared the moment Serafina Cruz stepped into view, the deep sapphire of her gown a vivid slash of color against the stark, white stone walls. "Miss Cruz, is it true you've withdrawn $5 billion from the Davenport Foundation?" a voice shouted. She didn't break her stride, moving to the center of the space with the unhurried grace of a monarch. Then she stopped, turning to face them fully. Her low ponytail was still immaculate. Her gold necklace caught the flash of every camera. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and simple, cutting through the clamor. "Effective as of 15 minutes ago." A forest of microphones extended toward her. "Why?" another reporter yelled. Her gaze was steady, her expression unreadable. "Because respect is not optional. And tonight, the Davenport Foundation demonstrated that it is a principle they no longer uphold." She lifted a folded document from her clutch and handed it to her attorney, Jessica, who stepped forward to read it aloud. "Formal notice," Jessica began, her voice crisp and legally precise, "of the immediate termination of the Apex Global Ventures Endowment Agreement with the Davenport Legacy Foundation. Pursuant to Section 14, Subsection 3, which stipulates a breach of the Moral and Ethical Conduct Clause, all allocated funds are to be returned in full within 30 business days." Gasps and the furious sound of typing filled the air. Serafina's voice joined in, low but carrying over the noise. "For the record, the following board members have been informed of this action: Philip Davenport, Elaine Tan, David Keene, Carolyn Mercer, and Senator Alistair Finch." With each name, the reporters leaned closer, recording every damning syllable. "This is not a negotiation," she continued, her voice hardening slightly. "It is the execution of a decision made the moment dignity was discarded in that ballroom." A reporter near the front raised his voice. "Do you expect retaliation from the board? A legal battle?" A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Serafina's lips. "I expect them to read the contracts they signed." Behind her, Jessica closed the folder with a final, resonant snap, the sound echoing through the cavernous lobby. Another question was shouted. "Miss Cruz, do you see this as a personal dispute with Victoria Davenport?" Serafina's eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second, but her tone remained perfectly even. "This is far bigger than one person's behavior, but tonight she became the face of a systemic problem the Foundation can no longer afford to ignore." The camera shutters were relentless now, a strobe of flashing white light against the polished floor. Serafina glanced toward the glass doors, where a black, armored sedan had just pulled up to the curb. "Gentlemen, ladies, you have your statement. Good evening." And with that she walked through the revolving door, the hem of her satin gown sweeping over the marble like a final, elegant signature on a declaration of war. Inside, the reporters were already on their phones, their voices overlapping in a frantic rush to break the story. "Confirmed. $5 billion. Immediate termination. Moral conduct clause." Outside, in the crisp Boston night air, Serafina slid into the waiting car. The door closed with a heavy, satisfying thud, muting the noise, sealing the moment. The strike had landed. The fallout was just beginning. The sedan hadn't moved yet. Through the tinted glass, Serafina saw the lobby doors swing open with violent force. Victoria emerged, her heels striking the marble too fast, too loud. Her diamond-studded clutch was gripped in her hand like a lifeline. Her eyes, wild and frantic, scanned the street until they locked onto the black car. She strode forward, a woman possessed, ignoring the calls from the reporters who were now trailing her like vultures. The driver glanced in the rearview mirror toward Serafina, waiting for a cue. Serafina lifted a single hand. "Wait." The rear door opened before Victoria reached it, and she leaned in, her voice a tight, ragged whisper. "You didn't have to do this. You could have just left." Serafina sat composed, a vision of calm against the chaos. One arm rested lightly on the leather seat, the sapphire satin smooth over her legs. "Didn't I?" she asked, her voice soft. This evening was supposed to be a celebration of the Foundation's mission, a mission to serve those it claims to help. Serafina's tone cut clean through Victoria's frantic energy. "Tell me, Victoria, how many of the people this foundation supposedly serves would have been given a seat at your table tonight?" Victoria's mouth opened, then closed. Her silence was a confession, Serafina continued, her voice steady and devastatingly precise. "You spent the night measuring my worth by my dress, my seat, my name on a card. I, in turn, measured yours by your actions." She leaned forward just slightly, the gold chain at her neck catching the glow of a streetlight. "And I found it utterly bankrupt." Victoria flinched as if struck. She tried to rally, to find some last shred of defiance. "You think you can just walk away and destroy my family's legacy?" "I don't think," Serafina said, her gaze locking onto hers, cold and hard as diamond. "I know." Behind them, camera flashes illuminated the lobby windows as reporters captured every fragment of the exchange through the glass. Serafina's hand moved to the door handle. "You have 30 days to return what remains of the endowment. I suggest you use that time wisely." Victoria's voice finally broke, the desperation seeping through. "And if we don't?" Serafina's expression did not change. "Then the courtrooms will decide how much more you stand to lose." The driver cleared his throat softly, a gentle signal. Serafina leaned back, indicating she was finished. Victoria stepped away from the car, the sharp night air a shock against her bare shoulders. She stood on the curb, a lonely, diminished figure, and watched as the sedan pulled away, its taillights glowing like embers, fading into the dark tapestry of the city. Inside the silent car, Serafina's phone buzzed. It was a text from Anya. Media coverage trending globally. Public sentiment overwhelmingly positive. Protocol Omega is the #1 hashtag on Twitter. Serafina glanced once out the rear window at the shrinking figure of Victoria Davenport, then turned to face forward again. The city lights slid past, their brilliant reflections dancing over the deep blue satin folds of her gown. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. The final word was hers, and its echo would linger in this city far, far longer than a single night. By morning, Boston was speaking her name. On the newsstand outside a cafe in Beacon Hill, the headline of the Boston Globe screamed in bold black letters, "CEO pulls $5 billion endowment over Gala humiliation." Beneath it was a stunning, full-color photograph from Marco. Serafina under the chandelier, microphone in hand, her eyes locked on a blurred, pale figure in the background, Victoria Davenport. Inside the cafe, televisions mounted on the wall were all tuned to different news networks, but they were all looping the same clip of her calm, powerful declaration. "Respect is not optional." At a corner table, two young women, students from a nearby university, were scrolling through their phones, their faces a mixture of shock and awe. "She didn't even raise her voice," one said, shaking her head. "She didn't have to," the other replied, her eyes wide. "That's real power." In a bustling office 3 states away, a non-profit director replayed the video for her entire staff. "This," she said, pointing a pen at the paused frame of Serafina walking off the stage, her sapphire dress a streak of defiance. "This is why we establish and enforce boundaries with our donors. She just set the new gold standard for the entire philanthropic world." On social media, the story had become a wildfire. The hashtags were everywhere. Micers Serafina Cruz, Ox Respect is not optional, Protocol Omega, the Boston Takedown. Clips of the moment. Victoria contemptuously tossed the place card were trending, often shown in a side-by-side comparison with stills of Serafina's unflinching, regal stare. Marco, the photojournalist from the Gala, had posted his series of exclusive shots just after sunrise. He had titled the collection, "The Engine and the Heiress." The images told the entire story without a single caption needed. From the first tense exchange at Table 1, to Serafina's triumphant walk to the stage, to her final, silent departure into the Boston night. Within hours, the images had been viewed and shared millions of times across the globe. Even within the hallowed, panicked halls of the Davenport Legacy Foundation's own offices, the atmosphere had curdled. Staff huddled in corridors, whispering about updating their resumes and the cascade of donor withdrawals that had already begun. A junior coordinator scrolled through her phone, showing a colleague a comment thread on a news article. "Look at this," she whispered. "If they treated their biggest benefactor like that in public, just imagine what happens behind closed doors." By mid-afternoon, financial analysts were on cable news, debating the cataclysmic fallout. $5 billion is not just a hole in their budget, it's a crater, one expert in a sharp suit said, gesticulating at the camera. "It's a signal to every other major benefactor. The reputational cost of this is simply immeasurable." And then came the community voices, the pastors, the educators, the small business owners, the very people the foundation was meant to serve. They seized the moment to talk about dignity, not just in high society galas, but in every sphere of life. One pastor's Sunday sermon, which went viral after being streamed online, quoted Serafina directly. "We must measure our worth and the worth of our institutions by their integrity." Through it all, Serafina Cruz remained silent. There were no follow-up interviews, no statements beyond the one she had delivered with such precision in the hotel lobby. Her phone buzzed relentlessly with requests from every major media outlet in the world, but she let them sit, unanswered. In the quiet of her penthouse office that evening, she stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, the city of Boston spread out in glittering electric lines below her. On her desk lay a single newspaper, folded to Marco's photograph of her in sapphire blue under the chandelier's blaze. She traced the edge of the image with one finger, her expression thoughtful. Then, she closed the paper and set it aside. Outside, the night deepened. The echo of her actions kept moving, radiating outward far beyond the gilded ballroom, far beyond her own story. The point had been made, and it was still being heard. 6 months later, the ballroom was hers. Not the Davenport's stuffy, guilt-ridden hall of crystal and judgment, but a gloriously restored public library in a revitalized Boston neighborhood. The brick walls were warm with soft uplighting, and the polished wood floors gleamed under modern Art Deco fixtures. Where once there had been silence and stern portraits of long-dead men, now there were rows of round tables filled with laughter and conversation. At the center of it all, a new banner hung, simple and elegant. The Apex Foundation, Integrity in Action. Serafina stood on a low stage. The sapphire gown had been replaced by a tailored suit of the same rich hue, sharp and professional. Her hair was still pulled into its immaculate low knot, the gold chain still at her neck, catching the soft light. The room was filled not with the city's old money elite, but with its true architects, community leaders, groundbreaking scientists, passionate educators, young artists, and daring entrepreneurs. Many were dressed in attire that would have been summarily dismissed at the Davenport Gala's door. Here, they were the honored guests. Marco was there, camera in hand once again, but tonight his shots captured joy instead of tension. Hands clasped in partnership, ideas shared over plates of food, children in their Sunday best laughing in the aisles. Serafina stepped to the microphone. 6 months ago, she began, her voice calm and resonant, I was told that there were certain tables I did not belong at. A warm, knowing wave of applause swelled through the room, unforced and genuine. So I decided to build my own. The applause grew louder. This foundation, she continued, her voice gaining strength, will measure worth by contribution, not by last name. It will measure success by impact, not by pedigree. We will fund the ideas that matter, without first asking who sits where. She paused, her eyes sweeping the room, connecting with the faces of the people her new foundation would serve. The front tables were filled with the once overlooked, the underestimated, who were now leaning forward, hanging on her every word. To those who tried to make me feel small, Serafina said, her voice clear and strong, I say thank you. You reminded me to think bigger. To those who stood with me, thank you for proving that respect is not optional. It is, and always will be, foundational. Her gaze found Marco at the edge of the crowd, and his camera clicked, capturing the moment. It was not an image of a challenge met, but of a new world being built. And to the next generation, she finished, her voice ringing with purpose, to every person who is ever made to feel that they do not belong. When someone tells you there is no seat for you at their table, do not waste your energy fighting for a chair. Build your own table. And make it longer, stronger, and more welcoming than you ever thought possible. You will be amazed by who shows up to sit with you. The applause was immediate, thunderous, rising to a standing ovation that shook the old library to its foundations. In a far corner, a television crew caught the entire speech live. By morning, the clip would be everywhere, a permanent part of the public consciousness. The insult, and now the answer, side by side for all time. Serafina stepped down from the stage, moving through the crowd, shaking hands, listening to stories, her presence a source of warmth and inspiration. The music swelled, not the brittle, formal strains of a string quartet, but the full, layered, soulful warmth of a live jazz ensemble. And somewhere in the joyful noise, you could almost hear the sound of a heavy door closing forever in that old, gilded ballroom, and 1,000 new ones opening in its place. Serafina Cruz didn't just win a battle, she had started a quiet revolution. What did you take away from her incredible story? Share the biggest lesson you learned in the comments below. Thank you for being a part of this community and for watching until the very end. Remember to like and subscribe for more stories that challenge, inspire, and matter. Until next time, keep fighting for your seat at the table, or better yet, get to work building your own.